George Monbiot, welcome to Conversations.
Thank you very much.
It's great to have you here in this insane place here where many of the NGOs and people who should be in there having their voice heard aren't, including yours. So hopefully we'll have a lot of people tonight that will be listening to Conversations and the news. Let's talk about the weather. From all the way back to the beginning of time, we've had 5 mass extinctions, and then we had a stable period for a long time. Then we had the Industrial Revolution. And let's talk about how that's changed since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution to now, and why people are trying to get back to under 350 parts per million of CO2.
Yes, well, carbon dioxide is the main greenhouse gas, and what a greenhouse gas is a gas which prevents infrared radiation, in other words heat, from escaping from the world's atmosphere. And even very small quantities have a very powerful effect in that respect. And what's happened is that we have raised the levels of carbon dioxide by, about 30% or so. It's gone from 280 parts per million before industrialization to about 385 parts per million today. And that's a huge increase in percentage terms, but it's not nearly as big as we're likely to have the rest of the century unless very drastic action is taken to prevent further greenhouse gas emissions. And and as those greenhouse gases build up in the atmosphere, global temperatures rise, and they've already risen by about 0.7 degrees centigrade. And the prospect is that they are likely to rise between about 2 and 6 degrees centigrade this century, which might not sound like very much, but don't forget that the difference between the last ice age and today is just 4 degrees.
Really? That's the total difference?
Yeah.
That's new. I didn't know that.
So we're talking about creating a totally new habitat on Earth, a totally different ecosystem, world ecosystem, a different biosphere. And that's a biosphere to which humankind has not adapted. Human beings have adapted to suit a very particular set of climatic circumstances, and we have. Our population has risen very sharply as a result of being able to prosper and thrive in that particular climate, and we've been able to populate lots of parts of the world which under different climates we would not have been able to populate.
Well, not only different climates, but also the advent of fossil fuel and the Green Revolution too, right?
Absolutely, and fossil fuel has given us an incredible ability to inhabit places which previously we couldn't have inhabited, and to enhance our general prosperity as well. But the downside, obviously, is that it's producing carbon pollution, which will make some of the places we've been able to inhabit because of this very kind climate that we have at the moment, it will make them uninhabitable because there won't be enough rainfall in those places, for example, or the sea level will rise. Now, we've seen throughout history, throughout prehistory, through natural fluctuations, significant shifts in the climate, sometimes by as much as 6 degrees centigrade in a very short period of time. And those shifts have always been accompanied by a complete ecological catastrophe.
Right.
So, for instance, at the end of the Permian period, 250 million years ago, there was about 6 degrees of warming, and almost all species on Earth were wiped out, well over 90 to 95%. On land, and even more perhaps in the oceans. Almost all the large vertebrates, the large animals with backbones, were wiped out, and the reptile species were dominated pretty well by just one species around the world, which happened to be well adapted to the completely new environment that was created. We are a species which has adapted to a particular set of climatic circumstances. Now, some of us will still be able to find that set of climatic circumstances, just as in the Ice Age, lots of parts of the world became uninhabitable to humans, and humans moved towards the tropics, and they were able to find places which they could live in. But the trouble is, then there were a few tens of thousands of people on Earth. Today, there are nearly 7 billion people on Earth, and many of those people have got nowhere to move to. And if large parts of the Earth's surface become uninhabitable, what happens to those people?
I think the estimate for environmental refugees in the next 30 years is something like over 1 billion of environmental refugees. Is that?
Well, whether people move or stay, their lives are going to become very difficult indeed, and and many people will try to stay on because people don't want to lose their land, but they will find their subsistence decreasing, and if they aren't able to move off, they will become more malnourished, and in fact many of them are quite likely to die.
Now let's put it in perspective of the COP15 proceedings that are going on. From what I understand, if we do absolutely nothing, we'll hit something like 5.5 degrees. If we do what they're saying in all the proceedings right now, it'll be 4.5 degrees, which is again uninhabitable, and we have very little time to shift. What are your thoughts about the what's happening at the COP15, and what are the issues that we should be paying attention to?
Well, it's very clear that with the exception of some of the least developed countries, there is no general discussion about what the science says. We in the rich world have paid hundreds of millions of dollars for the best science money can buy. We've funded climate science to try and find out what on earth is going on and what's likely to happen. And yet it's been left to the poor countries to tell us what our own scientists have been saying.
Right.
Because the rich nations have ignored their advice and are negotiating from a position which isn't informed by the science at all.
Well, of course, you talk about the hundreds of millions that's been spent on the climate science doesn't compare much to the billions that have been spent by, in our country, the coal, gas, and oil industry, disinformation industry.
That's right, and of course, that's not spending it on trying to make people better informed. That's spending money on trying to make people worse informed. And the denial industry is a very big one indeed. We know of large amounts of money sloshing into it, but there's got to be much more we don't know of, because it just happens we have the annual accounts of certain companies like ExxonMobil which show that they've been paying large amounts of money to people who deny that climate change is taking place. But we haven't been able to see the accounts of the coal companies and many of these other players who fund this extremely well-financed and well-organized industry.
Now, one of the things you said the other day that definitely caught my attention, and I think everyone there, is that the delegates are not serious, and you had a very good reason why. Can you talk about that what you were talking about?
Yes, the delegates aren't serious because they only have a demand-side policy for dealing with climate change, and what that means is that they're all trying to get us to reduce our demand for carbon-based energy. And they say we should change our light bulbs and buy more efficient cars and insulate our lofts and use renewable energy rather than fossil fuel energy and all the rest of it. They're all demand-side policies for reducing our consumption of carbon. Well, that's